We have you in mute.
Sorry. Hi, thank you all for your time. I'm Megan O'Boyle. I know data sharing isn't the most exciting topic seemingly, but I'm going to explain to you why it's super important for getting research and going forward. Right before I share my slides, I'll just let you know that I'm a parent of a child with Phelan-McDermid syndrome. It's a rare genetic syndrome, not different than DYRK1A, genetic cause of autism, epilepsy, ADHD, low muscle tone, lymphedema, sleep issues, constipation, and so on. So I'm about 20 years into this journey. And 10 years ago, our foundation, like yours, decided that they needed to collect data that we could share widely and it wouldn't be just in one place. And myself and several other parents went about doing it, and we felt very successful until a few years ago when we realized that the researchers wanted the data, but they didn't find the data that we had chosen to select very useful. So at RareX, I'm working with groups like yours to say, this is why you have to collect data. This is what kind of data you need to collect. And this is why it's really important that people come back every year and answer the questions. So I will share my screen. And since I'm the last of the day, I will try and get through the slides as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, you see my background as well, correct? Anna, can you see the?
Yes.
Okay,
I'm seeing.
Okay.
So, okay, probably if you want, when you click share,
Do you see everything now?
no. Okay, you worked.
It works now?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just going to go over what RareX is, why it's so important that DYRK1A has decided to do this, what it looks like, and what you're going to need to get started and take any questions. So RareX is a nonprofit, and we were created by a group of people that were frustrated with how slowly rare disease drug treatments were coming along. And they looked at what the barriers and burdens were. And it was groups like yours and mine not having the financial ability to do some of what needs to be done for research, not having the knowledge and the skill set to know everything about data collection and all the other things that are involved in research, and translations to make this global and so on. So RareX is trying to solve for lots of things to make data collection and data sharing, getting the data to researchers and industry, much easier for groups like ours. It's a platform that collects, and I'll talk about that today, connects, and I'll touch upon it today, but it's more for the future, and shares. And by sharing, I mean gets the data to the researchers in academia and industry. We don't own your data, you do. You as the person putting it in, the patient or guardian. We do not sell your data, not even to industry. And we don't do any analysis or research on the data. That is for the people that we can get it out to. And RareX is powered by a great technology. It's a nonprofit called the Broad Institute out of Cambridge, Massachusetts, and they are a collaboration between Harvard and MIT. So what's the deal with data? Why is it hard to get? And why is it hard to get out to people? Well, sometimes data exists in diseases, but they're in silos. A researcher in one university may have some, and a researcher at another university in another country may have some. But that data is available generally to the person that collected it. It may also reside in a pharmaceutical company or a hospital. there's also an issue with data not being structured. I told you that we collected data for many years, and we collected some great data, but some of the data we collected didn't yield what researchers and FDA need. And so by having structured data, using surveys that have been vetted by other parties and are known to yield the data that everybody needs is really important. Also, some data has been collected without the proper ethics oversight, and so it cannot be used. And then in many instances, especially with diseases that are just, recently been found, there's no data that exists at all. So this is kind of a crazy slide, but I'll walk you through it. At the top, in this pink color, are the 10 early adopting groups of RareX. And we just, you're going live today. We've had 5 other groups go live in the past few weeks. And so you'll see here, number 3 is your organization. And you'll go in and you'll set up an account and answer 3 surveys. And then over time, you'll get notifications if other surveys are added to RareX that are applicable to your family member. If your family member if you said no to seizures over here in this first survey, then you would not have to look at the seizure survey when it comes out. At the very bottom is a very important part. You put the data in, the researchers want to see it. And these are researchers from academia, from medical centers, and from biotechs and pharmaceutical companies, so industry as well as academia. And it could even be citizen scientists. The scientists go to one portal, they have put in their credentials, proving that they are upstanding scientists, researcher, they set up their account, they agree to do everything ethically, legally, and properly, and then they can just start querying your data. The beautiful part of this is they don't need to know what DYRK1A is. What if they're just interested in a certain age group of people that have seizures and a certain muscle tone, or just patients that have certain anomalies. So those researchers may happen upon your family member's data, even though they are not aware of the condition. So this is boring, but really important. And one of the reasons why your organization has chosen not to try and do this on their own. Governance is essentially how you collect, store, and share data, and everything around that. The privacy, the security, the compliance with data regulations in the countries and places where it's being collected and disseminated. I know you all have signed informed consents because every time we do something at a hospital or doctor's office or a research, we sign them. So all of this non-sexy stuff we take care of, we take responsibility for. So you all don't have to know about it. So we asked groups why they chose RareX, and at the top of the list is because this is going to speed things up, because we are bringing the structured and standardized questions and answers, and your organization doesn't have to come up with what do researchers need and then build the technology. This data is patient owned and managed, not owned or managed by the DYRK1A Syndrome International Association or any other DYRK1A organizations. We talked about boring governance. We talked about streamlining so researchers can go to one place. And I'll touch upon connecting to other data sources in a bit. This is no cost to your organization. So my organization has spent our entire research budget for the last 10 years on our data collection. And those funds that we worked very hard to raise with, golf tournaments and walks and t-shirt sales could have gone to funding other types of research. And instead we were just funding data collection. And again, no cost to the researchers. And the reason that's an issue is that often data collections charge money to industry. So what is the benefit for you? Because more than likely you are tired of answering surveys, especially since COVID. And, sometimes it's depressing when you can't answer the questions. And so, why am I asking you to give up a meal or give up a shower just to answer a survey? And it's because we're going to give you back data so you can see how you compare. You don't have to wait until this is analyzed and published on. we'll give you back what's called aggregate data. It's de-identified summary data. This is a huge tool for researchers and industry to identify patients for future studies and clinical trials. They go into that research portal and they query based on symptoms, based on genetics, based on a specific disease, and then they'll let RareX know which of the patients are best for their study or clinical trial, and we will reach out to those patients. This will absolutely get to more researchers worldwide, the way it's set up, than when you collect your own data and they have to come to each organization. There's an ability to connect with other patient organizations that may be in other parts of the world. The ability to update your symptoms anytime, not just when, you know, the clinician makes an appointment with you. You'll manage your own data, which I'll explain to you in the data sharing survey. And, you know, like the organization, you're looking for faster treatments. What do you need to get started? You need to have an email and you need to set up a password. You do not need a copy of all your medical records. The first sets of surveys are going to be something that you know right off the top of your head. You do not need a detailed family history of your ancestors, and you don't need a lot of time. We know if this is a burden, you won't come back every year. And if you don't come back every year, then we are not going to see a progression of how DYRK1A progresses over time. But you also don't have to finish it all at once. You have very unpredictable lives. So you go in, you do what you can. If you get pulled away, you can always come back. And I'll show you on the dashboard. It'll remind you what you've done and what you haven't. We do advise that you use Google Chrome, Apple Safari, or Mozilla Firefox. Do not use Microsoft Edge or Internet Explorer. So you're going to start, your organization will have links to give you. You can start off on the DYRK1A webpage with a link to the community page, which I'll show you. You'll set up your account like you do all your accounts on the internet. You'll review and sign the patient consent and the data sharing survey, and then you're off to the races. At the bottom, it says patient dashboard. This green arrow just shows you the things that you'll be able to go in and out of, and I'll show you that dashboard in a few minutes. So this is a screenshot of your community page. I can go to a live shot of it as well. But from your foundations page, you can link here, and it will tell you what this is and why you should participate. And it'll have steps on how to enroll, and then frequently asked questions and answers. Once you hit get started, you will be in. You can recognize how to set up the account. I will point out to you here, it says participant dashboard. You don't have any participants at this moment. We're going to change this, but essentially when you get to this, just hit add participant, and that will start you off. There are some pre-qualifying questions like, you know, what is your relationship? How old is the patient? Where do you live? This has to do with consent. If the patient is a minor or an adult, and if the patient is an adult, do they have the cognitive function to do the consent? Depending on the answers to all of these questions, you'll be directed to the appropriate legal document to consent. When you choose your diagnosis, there'll be a drop down, and there you are. And here's the consent. There was one screenshot that didn't come up, and it's actually the very first one you see, and it's going to say, I am the patient, I am the parent or guardian of the patient, or I am the loved one of a patient that has passed away. So in my case, I'm the middle one. I'm the patient, parent or guardian of a patient. Based on that choice, your questions will be worded accordingly. Now on the consent, you'll see these bubbles. Green is the page that you're on, blue is the pages that you have ahead of you. We tried to make this as simple and as short as possible, but we also needed to be as transparent as possible because people are very concerned about their data, especially if there's genetic data involved. So we cut it up into questions and answers, and we even cut the answers up if they seemed long. So we've got the quick answer, and then if you want to know more, you hit click more. On the second to last page, These are optional questions. I highly recommend that you say yes to both of them. The first one says, RareX may contact me with follow-up research surveys and invitations to take part in additional studies. I may choose to ignore these. If you say no, you'll never get the studies that we develop or we release along the way. So I can't think of a reason not to say yes there. And then the second question, RareX or a qualified patient organization may contact me if a researcher thinks I'm qualified for a clinical trial. Again, you can agree to be contacted. It doesn't mean that you have to say yes. So I would say yes to both of those. And the final consent page, it may seem odd the way it says your child's complete legal given name or name at birth. And there's a reason for that. It has to do with an algorithm, but even if you call your kid Billy, if the legal given name is William, please put in William. These fields should pre-fill future fields so that we're not asking your names again. So you've just left the consent. You'll get an email saying, thanks for consenting. Here's a copy of it. Consents are not changeable documents. Once they're done, they're done. The data sharing agreement, on the other hand, is completely changeable. You can decide that you want to share your data very narrowly, and then in a few weeks, months, or years, you can decide that you want to share your data very broadly, and you can just go in and change that selection. The first page of the data sharing agreement says, I either want to share my data in general research or only in health, medical, biomedical research. General research would be any kind of research. Health, medical, biomedical is obviously limited to those areas. And we get into more details if you're interested. I chose the top one. It's the most broad, but this is your choice and you can change it down the road. The second page is completely optional. If you are very concerned and want to really be narrow about your data being shared, there's an option to share with only non-commercial purposes. That means you will not have your data shared with pharmaceutical and biotech or industry. The second option is that you only want your data shared with studies that are being conducted under an institutional review board. That means an ethics board has reviewed this and thinks that it is safe and warranted. Again, you can pick both, one, the other, or none. I chose neither. You can choose whatever you want and you can come back and change it. The remaining questions are more for the future. So it's, do you know if you have biosamples? If so, where are they located? And are you interested in having biosamples collected someday? We are not collecting biosamples right now, but if we choose to, it'll be great to know if your community wants to share. We are not currently collecting medical records, but we would like to know if your community is interested. So if an opportunity comes up, we know whether you're interested. This would mean having medical record data collected and organized and structured and having it linked to the data that you're putting into RareX. It is not currently happening. We're just looking to see if you're interested in it. The second question on the left is, do you want to share your contact information, your name and email? That's it, with any patient advocacy group that supports your diagnosis. If you're on this webinar, you've already shared your contact information with the patient advocacy groups that I know of. But in many disease organizations, this will allow for wider sharing. I don't think it's a big deal for your organization. And the final one here is, what other studies have you been and can you list them? And the purpose for that is that if, let's say, a lot of you were in Dr. Smith's study, and I'm making Dr. Smith up, and all that data in Dr. Smith's study has already been used and nobody's really using it anymore, we could approach Dr. Smith and say, hey, a lot of people in the RareX collection would love to have the data that they contributed to your study linked to their study here. What do you say? So this is just really for us to be able to help in the future. So this is the dashboard. So you see you've completed your consent. you've completed your data sharing, and on these where it says start, you know, it means you need to go ahead and start. General information is the same as demographics, and you'll see Jane Doe Smith is pre-filled from the consent. And then there's the general questions that you're used to. Birthplace, the question for name and city and municipality of where the patient was born seems odd. Again, that goes towards this whole algorithm that is used in matching the same patient from two databases without them being identified. So I know it's an odd question, but it's necessary. For our international families, my apologies, but ethnicity in the United States, the standardized way that it is asked is this: Hispanic or Latino, non-Hispanic or Latino. I know it doesn't seem like what you're used to in Europe and other countries, but this is all from a standardized demographic survey. We then get to the health and development pages, and this is what I call the head to toe survey. These are going to be very general questions. You don't need your medical records, and it will be from head to toe in terms of systems in the body. And every question is yes, no, or unsure. And so it starts with the genetic testing. A question I said yes to is up here in the left-hand corner. Has the patient had issues with brain and or nervous system? Examples: seizures, epilepsy, developmental delays, intellectual disabilities, learning problems, significant problems with muscle tone, cerebral palsy, brain structure. You may have seen a neurologist. So that was an easy yes for me because my daughter has several of those things. You may have a yes for has the patient had issues with growth. These are super general, and you're thinking to yourself, this doesn't look like DYRK1A. I'm looking for something more specific. Beauty of this is everybody that comes into RareX is asked, and they have to answer these general questions. From these questions, for each one that you say yes to, there will eventually be an additional survey or two on that topic. And that's where you're going to get into the details. Note on this one, how old was the patient when you first were concerned about the development? A lot of surveys say, how old was the patient when the doctor diagnosed him? You know, it's all about the diagnosis. This is you as a parent. When did you suspect things went wrong or weren't going right? And this final one is open text. And if any of you are informaticists or know anything about data science, you say, oh, you should never have an open text where anybody can type anything they want. We are purposely doing this in the first year of this project because we want to get to know how patients identify themselves. So here on this very first one, you would type in DYRK1A or spell it out if that's how you prefer. And then you click another diagnosis and you might type in autism, but somebody else might type in ASD, and that's fine. And you click another diagnosis and you just keep going. And we will standardize it so that the 4 different ways you can say autism are all grouped together as one code. So just so you know, I think I had 16 diagnoses for my daughter, including GI issues, sleep issues, low muscle tone. So we're not limiting what you list. We're back to the dashboard. If you have more than one family member with DYRK1A syndrome, you would then add participant and you would be brought through the whole system again. The final survey is a quality of life survey. And I have a nonverbal child, so I am not crazy about having to answer certain questions that I can't answer. And you'll see here there is an answer that says, unable to answer because of my child's condition or communication skills. We are actually currently, this is a well-known, well-vetted, well-thought-of quality of life survey. We are actually looking for one that is better suited for patients like my daughter and possibly your children. And the example I will give you is, in the past 7 days, I don't know if my child felt worried because she cannot communicate that to me. So you just answer everything the best that you can. And that's it for the survey. If you do this at a library or somewhere on a public computer, please, please, please log out. It's kind of like when you get your, you're using a computer at a hotel and you get your boarding pass. You want to make sure you log out. So you all heard from Dr. Wendy Chung, who's phenomenal, about Spark and Simon's Searchlight. Is this a replacement? Absolutely not. Is this going to be complementary to it? We definitely hope so. Have you put stuff in Janita? Probably, and if not, I recommend it. I think it's a great international survey on both autism and intellectual disabilities. This is not going to replace that either. If you were to be invited to a survey or a study or a clinical trial a year from now, it's not this or that. All of this is important for different reasons and different audiences. This study is not being done by one particular institution that has limited funding, which means this is accessible to researchers around the world, not just the person that started it, and it will go on for a long time. This also has the ability to do cross-disease research. Every group we bring into RareX will have data that can be compared to the others. We promise to return aggregated data. I say to researchers all the time, I don't want an Amazon gift card. I want to know what you concluded from my data. So on a regular basis, we will give your organizations a summary or aggregate data, and they will get it out to you all. This is focused on drug development. So there's lots of things that you or your organization may want to know about that industry and FDA, frankly, they don't care about. And if that's the case, we're not going to ask it. And that's only because we're trying to make this as short as possible. Because it's long, I'm going to have a hard time getting you to come back a year from now. So there may be things in my community, people want to know, when did your child talk? When did your child get toilet trained? Those are important things. If they're not something that might be important, talking absolutely would be important. But if toilet training is not something that might be important to drug development, it may not appear in RareX's surveys, but there's certainly ways that your organizations can collect that data, and we'll even help them decide the best way to do that. So please don't feel frustrated if you get through the surveys and think they didn't ask me everything that they could have, because there's more surveys to come and we're focusing on drug development. And the other thing is, and I've said this 5 times and I'll say it 5 more, it's really important that you come back every year or as things change. You don't have to retake every survey every year. You just have to change the answers to the questions that have changed. If nothing's changed, that's great. You just click nothing's changed. That's really important too. But by putting the surveys out a few at a time, we're not expecting you to have to spend more than a half an hour. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so I can see all of you. And if need be, I'll go back to the slides. In summary, you guys are early adopters of an awesome thing that's not costing your organization any money, and will get data out to any researchers around the world. In a few months, we will ask you to upload your genetic report, and that will be added to your profile. There's lots of things that this technology can do down the road, but we're trying to keep it simple right now. So I will take any questions. Well, let me just start with, this has to be global. No rare disease can afford to be in English only. And we recognize that, and we will be international. The international piece is not just translation, though, it's regulation. So our friends in Europe, you're aware of GDPR, and it was not designed for health and medical data, so it's very difficult to comply to. We will comply to it, and we have to comply country by country, because each country thinks of their GDPR differently. So once we have met the data regulations in the appropriate country, then we do the translation and so on. So for now, this is open to anybody who has the link and can read English. So you can do this from any country, but it is only in English at this time.
Great, thank you so much. We do have a few questions here in the questions and the chat area. So one of these questions I think you answered already, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it since it's in someone took the time to ask it. It says, if we are already providing information to the Siemens Searchlight, do we need to do the same thing with RareX?
Unfortunately, yes. And that's because the Siemens Searchlight, and I work with them. I actually was on the Spark Advisory Committee. Their Siemens Foundation is phenomenal, but their study was designed for certain things, for certain purposes, and you were consented to specific things. And so they're limited. They're limited in what data they can give back to anybody, whether it's organizations or people. So yes, and some of the questions are going to look similar, as well as some of the questions in Janita. And we have reached out to both organizations, and we are, we will collaborate wherever possible.
Great. Our next question is, how is RareX funded?
We are a nonprofit, just like you, just like my foundation. So that means we're funded by grants and donations, philanthropic organizations. And currently, there's a big support from biotechs and pharmaceutical companies. And that is because when data doesn't exist and they're trying to develop a drug, they have to go back and collect it, which takes time, years, and it takes money, because when pharmaceutical companies are collecting data from a community like yours, they don't have an in and they don't have people's trust. The other issue is there's organizations like mine that when pharmaceutical companies come to us, we say, guess what? We have 10 years of data. And they say, oh, thank God. And then they look at the data and they say, this is okay, but we're going to have to go back and get more. And that's frustrating to them because it takes time and it takes money. So they would love to support us in collecting the exact right data that they can use to get the drugs right, and then FDA and EMA and all the other regulators for drug development will accept, because there's very strict rules around the data that can be used around drug development.
Great. Another question we have is, can you speak more towards why it is important to submit information to RareX? How do you expedite potential treatments for DYRK1A?
Excellent question, and I'm not going to make any promises. I'm not saying that if you put your data in every year, there's going to be a drug in 5 years. I've been putting data in for 10 years, and there's not a drug for Phelan-McDermid syndrome. But we're talking about centralizing data. If everybody with DYRK1A puts all of their data in one place, then researchers from industry and academia have a one-stop shopping. The really cool thing about this is also the cross-disease data. I've described my daughter's syndrome. I've read about your syndrome. I know about Fragile X and Angelman and Smith-Magenis and CDLK5 and all of the other alphabet soups. We have a lot in common. We're rare, but we're not unique. And what's going to happen with drug development is sometimes something's developed for one disease and it may be effective for others. When researchers are interested in something, if they're querying data in RareX about, let's just say, certain types of epilepsy, they may come across your family member and my daughter having never heard of these two syndromes, which means our data is being seen by researchers that we weren't already in our circle. And that's huge because they have new thoughts, new ideas, other partnerships. And so it really is getting more eyes on the data. So I'll play devil's advocate and say, well, then if that's so great, why should I do Simons and whatever else comes down the road? And the answer is because those are going to be deeper dives. We will only get into so many specifics. Again, we've got to keep the burden low. Once you're in a drug trial, the pharmaceutical company is going to want to get their own details. Or if somebody wants to do an in-depth publication on DYRK1A, they might find you through us, but they're going to want to follow up and do a more in-depth study. So that's what I mean by complementary. You get into the RareX data collection program, and it allows researchers to find you and possibly do a deeper dive.
That's great. And I just had one more question, and I would say for someone who is questioning on if they, I think you kind of answered this through a little bit of what you're talking about, but if someone is feeling uncomfortable or skeptical on if they should share their private information or if they should participate in research studies, what word of advice or recommendation would you give to them to help them decide if they should participate in a research study such as, you know, the RareX or Simmons or anything like that?
So, well, with RareX, you own the data, so you manage who gets to see it, and that's why I went through all that data sharing stuff. It's a very good question, and I know some people do have very big concerns, especially when genetics are concerned. It's everybody's personal decision, but the more data on a disease that's out there, the more accurate the conclusions can be to move the research forward. And by silencing your data, your story is not being heard. You know, I get 3 hours of sleep at night, and I want to make sure whoever's doing a sleep study hears that story. I want to be counted. So, you know, I think it's always important that you look at the source of who's collecting data. Is it somebody that has an IRB? We hold the institutional review certificate for RareX so that you all don't have to go through that. You know, security and confidentiality. We are compliant to the highest degree because the Broad Institute has been required to be compliant to the highest degree for previous funders. So this is a very gold standard technology that's holding your data and sharing it. I would also throw out there, unless you don't have a smartphone and unless you don't search things on the internet, your data is out there being bought and sold and shared more than we will ever know and more than we ever want to know. Starbucks and CVS and Netflix knows more about me than my doctor knows about Shannon, which might be scary. I don't lose sleep over it. It's just so that they can sell me more things. But this area of data, health and medical data, research data, is very highly regulated and policed. And if you choose not to share it, you don't have to. In a community as small as yours, I think every single patient counts.
That's great. I did notice there's a couple more comments that I missed. And so we still have a few more minutes, so we'll go ahead and address those until our time runs out. So it says, this looks like a valuable and amazing resource. My doctoral research is focused on the proteins in the DSCR on chromosome 21, and my main focus is DYRK1A and how it affects the neural development. I'm happy that I'm so happy that there's going to be a way to gather data that can help advance research in these areas. Thank you for your work on this. And that was from Melissa.
Absolutely. And Melissa, not today, because we've got a few. Let me just back up. DYRK1A is an early adopter of RareX. And by that, I mean in the first 10 groups that is going live. So this is just the beginning. This is only going to get bigger and better. So in a few months, we're going to ask you guys to come back and upload your genetic reports. We will have geneticists who take the information from those identified genetic reports that has your name and your address on it, and they will enter that in the back of the RareX survey so that all of your answers on your family member will be connected to that genetic report data, but it's all de-identified. There's capabilities, like I said, to connect with other technologies that might be collecting your medical records and organizing those some days. There's going to be capability for connecting to apps and wearables and all sorts of other things. But we are at the ground floor. And so we're keeping it simple. We started in neuro, but we're here for 9,000 diseases. So we'll be adding skeletal and cardiac and renal and all these other things. But right now we're starting with neurodevelopmental groups because we have the surveys to meet their needs, and then we'll grow from there. So is everything, the data available right now? I would not send researchers yet because it's like sending somebody to a store that doesn't have anything on the shelves. Let's get some data in there. And once there's a significant amount of data that's statistically, of use, then we'll help your organization reach out to your current researchers, but more importantly, to other researchers that may not know who you are. So again, I'm not promising everything today. This does not mean that you flip a switch and you have a drug. This just is meant to lessen the burden and remove some of the barriers to make things go faster.
Great. I'll read off a couple comments and then there's a couple questions after that. So one comment that comes from Misha is that says all data collected through Simmons Searchlight is also available to researchers. So that's good to know.
It is, yes. Thank you for bringing that up.
Sarah, she says, thank you for welcoming DYRK1A into the RareX family. We know there are so many dozens of others wanting to be a part of this early adapters group and really appreciate it and the potential to expedite drug development.
Yeah, we're really excited. And now that we've walked through this journey with you all, it's getting faster and easier. And so we're going to do another 15 groups next month, and then another 15 after that. And then we'll do, I foresee we'll be bringing out hundreds a year. And that's great because the more we get in there, the better. I'll give you an example of why those general questions are also important. We thought we knew what Phelan-McDermid syndrome was after 20 years. And we thought the researchers said they knew the phenotype that was published. We asked our questions. As our families became adults, there was things happening and every parent thought it was just their kid. It turns out when they all got together at a conference and talking, they realized there was a common psychiatric break and catatonic break that was happening with some of our adults, including my daughter. There was zero data on this because no one saw it coming and nobody asked about it. So by asking about all of the systems in the body, even though they're not all related to DYRK1A, is really important. Because sometimes you have something that has nothing to do with your syndrome because you inherited it from your mother. And that's still part of your medical story. And we don't want people that have multiple conditions to have to join multiple data collections. So by asking about all of the symptoms in the body, we might actually find out that there's some things that are going on that the researchers didn't pick up on. In our Facebook group, I started seeing people talking about CVI. And I was like, what's CVI? It's cortical vision impairment. My kid doesn't have it, but within an hour, lots of families with PMS had chimed in, but it hadn't been published on. So by asking questions about, do you think your family member has eye issues? That gives everybody an opportunity to say yes, no, or unsure. So I just wanted to throw that out there if you're annoyed to be asked about, things that you don't think are associated with the syndrome.
Yeah, and that's great to know because someone actually asked a question about if they've seen the cortical vision impairment in children with DYRK1A, and that might be something that we can find and we can learn through things like this where people come together and they're sharing their information to share with each other. So we have a couple, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's a common story for all of our syndromes. They think they know it from the first 20 patients. And then once we get to 200 and then 2000, we start to see less typical or less common traits, but they're common nevertheless. So, hopefully this will parse out some of those other phenotype or symptoms that the researchers haven't been looking at.
Great. So we have a couple more questions here. Someone said, thank you, Megan, for all that you're doing. We have someone that says, are you seeing or working with researchers, researchers who are working with RareX to develop therapies as well as new drugs?
Not in the RareX data because we've only been collecting it for 4 weeks. But this incredible platform that it's got a fancy name, Federated Data Access and Analysis Platform, which essentially is this platform where the researchers go in, they give their credentials, they swear to act responsibly, and then they do querying. That is being used and has been used for a long time, and is being used actually by something called All of Us Research Study, which is a 1 million person study out of NIH. So that platform currently has lots of other data sets. RareX will just be another data set. So they have genomics data, and they have data on specific, cancers and things like that. So the technology has been there, and the researchers know about it. Not all researchers, but we'll get the word out. But in terms of our RareX collection, it's just getting started. But like I said, we're not taking diseases on one at a time. We're taking them on in groups. And there's 1 mega now. Next year, there'll be 10. The groups will get larger. We really will scale this up. There's lots of groups that need this data collected.
Great. So it looks like we have, unless I've missed any, it looks like we have one last question. I asked that. I think I asked this question, but it says, I apologize. I'm sure this has been answered, but I was taking care of my son, so I may have missed it. How do we join and upload our information? But it might be a good reminder.
So there's probably several ways. One is, I haven't been to your website, but I think there's something on your website that will take you to your community page. And this recording will be made available. And I am guessing that the link from the community page will be made available on your social media this week and in coming weeks. And if you all have any issues at all, you don't like the way it looks, you're confused by something, please reach out to somebody in your community, or that there's an email in the system that says if you have questions, it's something like support@rarex.org. I can't promise you that everything's going to get fixed right away, but the point of being an early adopter isn't just that you get first in line to something cool, but it's also you help us with version 2, 3, and 4. So we're happy to take any suggestions, criticisms, concerns. You can feed them through your organization. We'll be in touch with them every week, or you can feed them to us. Currently, every Friday, they will get a report that says how many people registered, which means set up account, how many people enrolled, which means they got through the consent and have consented and answered surveys, and then what countries they're from. So this is a challenge for all the countries to outdo each other in enrollment.
Great. Well, I think as far as the question answer and the chat session, it looks like all of our questions have been answered. So thank you so much for your time and helping us, Megan. And hopefully some of these sessions have sparked some interest in some families who are joining on for not only the RareX, but also the SIM and Searchlight, the Spark studies, and the Tiger studies, because like you said, the more information we have about us, the more people know about us, and the more we can get our information out. So thank you so much for your time. And then I'll go ahead and let Anna take over the last bit.
Thank you guys for your attention.
Thank you very much, Megan. Thank you, Adrian. So just a last reminder, we are recording, always going to be posting our YouTube channel. Don't forget about our RareX for DYRK1A second year. And this year is a 21-day challenge. So if you didn't join yet, go to our social media. All the information is there. It's like an international challenge, so you can join for many different countries. Either participating in the run, with run, walk, hiking, what's your preference, or donating to the cause. The challenge is going to finish in August 21st. That's our awareness day. So participate, post pictures, let's be loud about it, and make everybody knows about DYRK1A syndrome. The last link there, the Cisco collab webex.com with Julie Dore. That's like the WebEx link for the last session of the day. So we are going to have 2-hour breaks now. So 2 p.m. California time, PST, 5 p.m. East Coast. We're going to have the last session. That's only for families, is how to cope with kids with special needs. It was an awesome session this morning. We already had one earlier. So if you didn't have a chance to get the morning one, there's another chance for the afternoon. Other than that, we can resume the session.
Oh,
I went ahead and put the link to the community page in the chat.
thanks. I was just about to say that for people